Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Zeppelin Studios. Nice to have you here again. This is the first video of our producer series, which we'll be featuring today on our YouTube channel. We will have a few different series on this channel consisting of the following. So the first series will be the session musician series, which is actually us playing the instruments. So we will show you, everything to do with the instruments, the theory of the instruments, so the scales, the tempos, the beats, what guitars we use, and how we play them, note for note. The second part of our series will be the producer series, which is this one. This is the first episode of the producer series, where we will concentrate mainly on the DAW, the sound processing, the mixing, and the mastering, everything that goes on within the DAW itself after the instruments are recorded. On top of that, we also have a third series we'll call the interview series, where we'll be interviewing local musicians from all walks of life, teachers, professional, hobbyists. We'll interview them on our channel. Of course, on top of all of that, we will also have the fourth set of videos, which are the music videos, the lyric videos, any of our releases through the Zeppelin record label name. So without further ado, let's get started on the first video for our producer series. This song is called The Hall of Ceremonies and is written by myself. Okay, before we get started, perhaps a bit of a backstory. Zeppelin Studios started about 16 years ago as an idea, a concept, when I was a young and aspiring musician, and I didn't have any money to go to one of those big record labels to record my stuff. So I decided with a friend of mine that we set up a web design company. We made money from that, took the profits, and I bought a few pieces of gear and just set up a small little recording studio in my own home. This was about 16 years ago, mind you. So from there on, I have been backward engineering everything to do with sound recording within a studio of this size. If anybody knows what they're talking about, I believe I do, in terms of treating a small room, in terms of making it sound like that $1 million studio. I have backward engineered it from 16 years ago to where we are today. Before the record label, Zeppelin Studios was a jamming studio at Excelsior Shopping Centre here in Singapore. So after that, we decided to just scale everything back home here to our record label here in Singapore. So right now, we are a professional recording studio and a professional record label here in Singapore with an artist roster of about 4 artists, and we hope to grow. So I like to start out recording the drums for any track. I play all of the instruments on all of my songs, and I usually start out with recording the drums on a click track just as a guide. So I get the tempo of the song and then I record. So that will be something for the other series that I was talking about earlier, which is the session musician series, where I'll show you how we go about actually playing the drums recorded into the DAW. But for this producer series, we'll just go through the tracks and the effects that we use on each track. So we start out with the drums. If we just solo the raw drums that was recorded in. And by the way, this drum set was a Ludwig Evolution drum set coupled with Ludwig Black Beauty and Zildjian Crash cymbals hi-hat. So this was recorded at our session recording studio at Excelsior Shopping Centre. So that's just the drums on its own. Okay, up next we have the bass guitars. This is actually a Squire precision bass going into the Headrush MX5, which is going into the Rubik's 22 audio interface. Okay, so what you hear for the bass track is this Headrush MX5, that is used to record the bass into the DAW. This is a guitar amp modeler as well as an effects processor, and it sounds really nice coupled up with the precision bass that we have here in the studio. So first we use a gray compressor, and so this is basically a signal chain going in. It's a gray comp to compress the bass signal coming in, and then it goes to an amp modular, which is this one is called the 69 Blue Line Scoop. And after that it goes to a cabinet modular, which is called the it's an 8x10 Blue Line cabinet for bass guitars. And then we have it going into an 11 reverb, which you will hear in the sound, you will hear in the track that's recorded in the DAW. And then after which we have the volume. So this one is just to control the volume on the expression pedal here, so that if I need to, I can control it on the expression pedal itself. So this is a very nifty little thing, amp modular effects pedal that we have here at Zeppelin Studios that is used to emulate a bass amp for the Squier bass, Squier precision bass going into the DAW. So let's see what all that sounds like on the bass track alone. And then we couple it with the drum track. One rule that I follow is my go-to rule when I'm mixing is that I will close my eyes and I imagine that I'm in a specific room. Maybe it's a small theater, maybe it's a small hall, maybe it's a large room. So depending on what I feel the music should sound like it's in, I will usually mix by closing my eyes and imagining that I'm in the same room as the musicians. And so in this case, if you listen to the drum on its own, these are the drums on its own. And then you add the bass, and going according to levels, the drums is at 0. I don't like to push the waveform too high or too loud. I like to give it a bit of space, I guess, in this day and age. They call it gain staging. In this case, the drums is around -5 dB at its loudest, so at the bottom here. And that's good enough already for the drums. So once again, you're listening to all of these sounds raw and without any processing coming in, except for whatever I mentioned earlier. So now you put the two of them together, and if the bass comes out, so when you switch the bass guitar on, it's as though someone is going into the room and switching the bass player's amplifier on and off. So if that matches your sense of what you want to hear, then I guess you're in a good place to start. So as for bass levels, you can see here the bass is very, very soft. That's why in terms of corresponding with the drums volume, the bass is at plus 4.29 dB. So I had to increase the bass up quite a bit so that it's in balance with the volume of the drums, so you get that sense that you're in the same room with the drum and the bass. So next up, we have the guitars. This is the lead guitar that follows the bass line and the bass riff. That's going into the Vox MX50, which is in turn going into the Rubik's 22. So this little beauty is the Vox MV50 that we use here at Zeppelin Studios. It's a a small little 50 watt, believe it or not, head amp. It has this thing called new tube technology, which is I don't know if you can see it in there. It's actually a condensed version of the usual valve technology that you have on the older amplifiers, which we do have here in the studio as well. But this is the updated version. It's called New Tube by Vox, and it gives the guitars those tube-like sounds. So very simple adjustments here: your gain, your tone, and your volume. I adjust these when it goes into the DAW, so the guitar goes direct into one of these MB50s, and from the MB50 it goes out and into the Roland Rubix 22. So going into the Vox MX50, we also have no compression. We have just adjust the knobs so that for the lead guitars you got more gain, and for the rhythm guitars you have less gain. So let's hear how all of that sounds like together. Again, in terms of mixing, I may just make sure that it sounds like the whole band is playing together in the same room. In this case, I didn't do anything to the guitar levels as well, because recording the guitar into the DAW over the drum and the bass lines, it sounded good. So I didn't need to make any adjustments later on in the DAW. Next up, we have the rhythm guitars. If you see, the rhythm guitars are actually already pre-leveled going into the DAW through the MX50 once again. And for these guitars, I actually use the Fender 70s reissue, the Stratocaster, because I found that it gives a more vintage sound to the overall feel that I wanted for the entire track. So let's give a listen to the rhythm guitar, first on its own and then in context. So that's for the rhythm guitars, which you see here in the turquoise. So in context with the rest of them, so the lead, the bass, and the drums, let's hear what it sounds like when it goes into the verse. So that's the rhythm guitars, and they're slightly panned left. So now I leave space for the bass, which is in the center. And also I have organs in this track, which will be panned right. So now moving on to the organs, which are panned right, let's just solo the organ. And in the beginning of the song, we have this scream. So in context, you hear that, and that's on the right hand side because I already placed the rhythm guitar slightly on the left. So at this point, it's all coming together already. What I did was that I separated the organs on double tracks. So the organ scream where you have that wow, is on one track, and then after that on another track is when the chords come in during the verse. So let's listen to the other track. So now the organ is complementing the rhythm guitars already. And one is pan left and one is pan right, and they all got their space, and everything sounds like you're in the same room with them. Organs, we're using this VST by UAD called Waterfall B3, which is a beautiful, beautiful VST. You can control the speed of the Leslie speakers. So for those of you who don't know what a Leslie speaker is, it's a speaker that rotates. And by rotating fast or slow, you get a quick tremolo or vibrato, or you get a slow tremolo vibrato. So when you speed it up, it gets faster, and when you slow it down, it gets more mellow and slower. So that's for the organ side of things. Halfway through the song, we actually have a Glockenspiel, which is a beautiful little instrument. I wonder if you can hear it here. I got to solo it first, so yeah. And that happens in a break halfway during the song. So let's just hear everything in context that we've heard already, and then the little Glockenspiel coming in. And this is in conjunction with the lead vocals. And everything you heard earlier. So that's halfway during the song. I actually used this VST for the Glockenspiel called the BBC Symphony Orchestra VST. It's a very nice VST to use, and it has everything in an orchestra that you need. This VST is actually under Spitfire. So in the last quarter of the song, we actually have a green sleeves break. And this is where 2 harps and 1 Glockenspiel come in. So let's just give a listen to them. I believe there are 2 harps which are being plucked. Actually, no Glockenspiel, just 3 harps that are being plucked. So this is for the green sleeves break in the last quarter of the song. Let's give a listen. And everything you heard earlier comes in. So for these 3 tracks, tracks 8, 9, and 10, is basically just 3 different harps. One of the harps in the VST is playing the bass line. So if I solo that, and this is the melody. And the other one are the chords. So if I solo this, and then the last one I believe is the bass. So it's just plucking the lower strings of the harp. Let's give a listen. That's for the harps for this section. And then after that, so if you listen to all of them together, we have the melody, the chords, and the bass. So performing on top of all of this during the green sleeves break is my wife, Moira, who's playing the flute. So let's give a listen to her flute playing. and then it goes into, so if you put everything in context, yeah, when she goes, so that's yeah, in the low E. That's for Moira's flute. So that's during the green sleeves break in this song, which is towards the last quarter of the song. Next up, on track 12 and 13, we actually have the guitar solo. So let's give a listen. So that's the guitar solo going into the door, and just going into the right-hand channel. This is panned almost far right. Again, another old school way of expanding an instrument is by duplicating it, offsetting it, and panning the two tracks separately on the left and right channels, which is what I did here. So you can see on these two tracks, track 12 and 13, if I zoom in, you can see that they're slightly offset from each other. And the one on the top here is the track that's going to the right channel, and the one on the bottom is going to the left channel here. So if you listen to the individual right channel, and then I add in the left just for context. So this is a very old school way of making any instrument stand out. They basically just play over the existing track. So they do one solo and then they do the second solo. And then the second solo is always not in perfect timing with the first solo. So they will slowly spread the tracks to left and right. And this gives it a very big feel, something that you hear a lot in the Black Sabbath albums. So up next, we have the vocals. This is pretty self-explanatory. The vocals just we'll go into the VSTs later. But once again, the whole idea is that you get yourself feeling, when you're mixing, you get yourself feeling as though you're in the same room as the entire band. So let's just hear the vocals. We'll solo all of the tracks, I believe. We can do so at this point.
It's a city floating on the ocean water. It is a landscape filled with masquerade and glee.
So track 14 is the lead vocals, and then we have track 15 and 16, which are the backup vocals. So let's give a listen to the lead vocals and then coming in, or maybe all of the vocals at the same time.
Hold on as we pay our visit now.
And you can hear the volume is going up and down, up and down. It's like loud, soft, loud, soft. So this will be solved later on with compression.
Hold on as we pay our visit now.
So that's the lead vocals and the backup vocals. So a total of 3 tracks during the chorus and the bridge that I added in, basically sang over myself for backups. Last but not least, we actually have an outro on the song. So this is the last part of Hall of Ceremonies. And this is an outro using the Waterfall B3 VST from UAD, rendered out so that I can, again, like what I did with the lead guitars, layer them, offset it, and spread it to the left and right channels. So let's give a listen to the organs. So let's hear the organ on its own. Again, same with the lead guitars. This is on track 17 and 18. Same with the lead guitars, I just duplicated it, offset, and this is after it's rendered out from the MIDI so that I can give it a bigger, wider feel to the outro for the organs. So with that, let's hear everything in context, just briefly. This, once again, is just the raw sound that you're hearing from each individual track coming out. And then we'll move on to the master bus.
Hold on as we pay our visit now. Hold on as we pass. Tonight the moon will light an arrow. Ow!
So that's everything in context without any processing. So let's go into the individual tracks now and find out what I use to process each individual track. Okay, so we start with the drum track. The drum track is one of those tracks that have processing on them, individual tracks. The first VST that we used in the drum track was the Pultec 1A EQ by UAD. This is of course modeled after the original Pultec EQs, and they were amazing EQs to use. This VST replicates them amazingly. This video is not sponsored by UAD. I'm a personal fan of UAD, so I use a lot of their VSTs in all of my tracks. So for the drums, just to give it a bit of low-end boost, we used the Pultec 1A, and I boosted the low frequencies, and at the same time, I use a bit of attenuation. And on this EQ, attenuation works very well. It does not cancel out whatever you boost. So let's just give a listen in the difference of sound. And then when you enable it, disable, enable, so you can see it's boosting the kick end of the drums, and I felt that that was necessary in terms of the actual raw recording of these drums. So next up for the drums, we actually use compression on them and using the UAD Fairchild compressor VST. So for this one, I started out with a preset, which is called Drum Loop Kick Pusher High. And I found that messing around with the presets or going through the presets, this was the one that sounded best for this drum track. So what I did was I just selected this preset on the Fairchild and I tweaked the settings a little to adjust them to what I found was best for this drum track. So let's give a listen before and after this VST is activated. So you can hear there's a big difference because the Pultec is actually modeled after an old tube compressor. So you get that very mellow, warm sound on this drum track. There wasn't even a lot of compression used for this one. So just by enabling the compressor, you can hear the difference in sound for the drum track. So for the next track that had processing in this song was Moira's Flute, where we gave her a denoiser, compressor, and a bit of reverb. This is a fantastic reverb VST that we have here in the studio, and it's one of my go-to VSTs for reverb. Let's just listen. Once again, I choose a preset, but in this case, it's the default preset, and then I mess around with the settings until I get the sound that I want on her flute. This is before it's enabled, and we enable it. Which makes it very different sounding and gives it that depth and width that you need. The third VST we use on Moira's flute is the 660 compressor. It's a Fairchild compressor modeled by UAD. This is a condensed version of the compressor, so a bit more simplified controls and not too much to mess around with. But it does give it that different sound that I was looking for in this flute track. So let's give a listen to the 660 compressor before and after. Disable, enable. So what my ears are hearing are actually an expansion of the audio spectrum. So I'm hearing more dynamics when I enable the 660 compressor. And the last VST for Moira's flute was a denoiser, simple denoiser. This is called the Burton denoiser. I haven't updated it yet, but it's a fantastic denoiser that I use, and it's one of my go-to denoisers for any track, whether it be a guitar, vocal, or flute. So what I did was just that I attenuated a lot of the low frequencies for the flute, so to leave her mid highs and her highs more prominent in the mix. So let's give a listen to the denoiser before and after. Disable, enable. So it actually smoothens out the sound of the flute as well when you add in the denoiser, and all of these coupled together actually do make a very big difference on one track. Okay, and last but not least, we have the vocal tracks. For the vocal tracks, I'm actually using plugin racks in Waveform 13 Pro. And using these vocal racks, you can actually just put together a group of go-to VSTs that you use all the time and save them into a particular rack. They call it a rack. So in this case, for vocals, I have all of it preset already. This is my go-to for vocals. So if I need a delay, it's there. If I need reverb, it's there as well. Let's just push this up here. And if I need compression, which I always need, is there as well. So for vocals, we tend to switch on and off in terms of delay. Sometimes we don't need the delay in the vocals, sometimes we need the delay. So that's dependent. We can switch these on and off as we want. But the good thing about having plugin racks in Waveform 13 Pro is that I can just immediately enable 3 VSTs and disable 3 VSTs all at the same time, just so that I can hear a difference in the sound and what it's affecting. So let's give a listen to the main vocals, the lead vocals, with the plugin rack, with all these 3 VSTs I mentioned earlier, switched on and switched off.
They floating on the ocean water. It is a landscape filled with masquerade and glee.
Okay, let's hear it again with the plugin rack enabled.
It's a city floating on the ocean water. It is a landscape filled with masquerade and glee.
So you can hear the difference that all of these VSTs make in the sound of the track as well. So they actually do make a very big difference. Once again, when I enable and disable.
And if you watch the little boats that float forever, you'll be blessed with pure emotions. If you rest your soul, you'll see.
And once again, I was going for that vintage sound, almost like a John Lennon with the delay and the reverb. And I found that this plugin rack is my go-to plugin rack for most vocals that we record here in Zeppelin Studios. So, of course, we have our backup vocals as well, and they're using backup plugin racks with the same VSTs, but slight changes, very minor changes in the adjustments, but the same delay VST. So let's just have a look at this plugin rack. The Hitsfield reverb chamber, and of course, the 670 Fairchild compressor by UAD.
At the Hall of Ceremonies, you may mingle in disguise. At the Hall of Ceremonies, nothing comes as a surprise.
So you can hear what a big difference they make to the vocals. Let's hear all of it in context together with the music. So now you will hear a change in the overall track sound. As the drums, and again, I'm trying to just visualize myself being in the same room as the whole band and mixing accordingly. As for the backup vocals, one of the vocals is going to the left and one is slightly right. And of course, the main vocal is right in the center.
Landscape filled with masquerade and glee. And if you watch the little boats that float forever, you'll be blessed with pure emotions. If you rest your soul,
Hear the backup.
at the Hall of Ceremonies, you may mingle in disguise. At the Hall of Ceremonies, nothing comes as a surprise.
So that's the overall mix without the master bus VSTs activated. Next, let's hear how the whole track sounds so different when we activate the master bus VSTs. Alright, so now we're playing the entire track. None of the tracks are soloed, so we're playing everything at the same time. Let's start with the first VST that I used. Again, it's the Hitsfield Reverb Chambers by UAD. It's really one of my go-to reverb. In this case, I selected a preset and then after that adjusted accordingly to what I required. For the case of this track, I felt that the lows and the highs needed to be boosted all the way up so that you get more punch in the reverb on the lows and the high ends in terms of reverb. So let's just play the track now with the reverb off and then activate it to see the difference. Or hear the difference. So you can hear the difference in the sound. The minute you switch the reverb on for the master bus track, it almost glues the whole track together. So what you're hearing now is a very different version of the whole song you heard earlier in the video. So now that we have the reverb that we want to glue the whole track together, let's go on to the next VST, which is the compression. Having a compressor in your master bus is a must. It just glues the entire track together, coupled with the reverb, and it gives the whole track, every transient, more punch. And this, once again, was with the mindset that I was going for the vintage sound that I wanted in this particular track or in the whole album of the 8 songs. So the next VST in the master bus is the Hitsville 670 compressor. Let's listen to the song with and without the compressor. So we start with without. And then we enable it. Disabled. And we enable it. So at this point, the song just sounds awesome, but we're not done yet. The third VST we have in the master bus is actually a VST that comes with Waveform 13 Pro. It's called the Master Mix. So this one was to tame whatever the Fairchild was boosting. If you look at it, we have almost no equalization. Actually, we have no equalization. We don't have a high pass or low pass filter on this track. All we did was that we have little band filters here for the low ends and the mid range. So let's give a listen to the master mix before and after. You will actually hear a drop in the volume, and that concerns the next VST in the master bus. So at this point, you will hear a real big difference in the whole song. It sounds more tame, more punchy. Everything sounds more glued together. It sounds bigger, it sounds wider, and it sounds very vintage. So what's happening here in the master mix is that if we key solo, we can hear the low end frequencies that are coming from the boost from the Fairchild compressor. So those are the sounds that we are filtering out that our ears don't really need to hear. Then in the mid-range, those are also some mid-range sounds that wouldn't really make a difference to us and would clean up the overall mix and master. Another thing we have going on in the master mix here is the gating. The gating is helping to push some of those sounds that are below minus 62.5 dB and push them closer to the glass so that we can hear those little subtle dynamics in the song. If you notice here for the master mix, and one of the last things we have on the master mix activated was a cut minus 2.2 dB. This is because I was trying to experiment with the LUFS requirements for online streaming platforms and seeing where it will get me once the song has been uploaded already. So this brings us to the last VST in our master bus, and it's the controversial Yulin loudness meter 2. It's not the VST that's controversial, it's the usage. So I bet you heard online that everybody is talking about all the requirements for uploading music to streaming platforms. Well, I have to say it's a lot of bull. I was looking at different articles where people were saying that you need to meet these requirements, otherwise your music will be too soft or too loud. On another hand, I read articles that are telling me that if your music is too soft, the streaming platforms will actually help you boost the song. And if your music is too loud, the streaming platforms will help you cut your song. In this case, I decided to follow the minus 14 LUFS requirements and see what happens when my music is uploaded. So of course, mine being the first album for a record label, I would have been happy to be the guinea pig, and I did it so. And I found out that there were other songs on the streaming platforms that were -7 in LUS, way above the -14 that were required. So in this case, I would urge you to go with what sounds best to your ears is more important than meeting a certain number or anything that anybody requires. The most important thing is that the whole song sounds very nicely glued together and as realistic as possible, depending on the angle that you're going for in the mix. In this case, after uploading my song, it almost sounded the same volume as the other songs on the streaming platforms. I'll urge you to go with what sounds best to you. And there you have it. That's the end of our first episode to the producer series. I hope you enjoyed it, and it gives you a bit more insight into what we do here at Zeppelin Studios when we produce, mix, master, and release a song. Stay tuned for our next video coming out really soon. And with that being said, I'm Brandon Gabriel here at Zeppelin Studios. I hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you in the next video. And there you have it. That's the end of the first... Hear myself.